Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm Fran, I'm from Venezuela. And today we're going to be watching a video called How Did the British Empire Rule the World? I know that at some point, in history, the British were rulers. I think it was like 60% of the world's countries. So it's like over half of the world. And at different points in time, they sort of like really did sort of like there wasn't a territory in the entire world that they didn't really get to, but they really did enter like every corner of the world. There's not a continent in which the British didn't really enter at some point in time. So obviously I'm really interested to see and to learn how they managed to do that. Obviously it's pretty impressive how they managed to actually like do that. So let's check it out and comment, like, subscribe, and start. I actually really like this music, by the way. It's very like religious? Not very religious.
The British Empire may not have technically ruled the world, but it was in fact the largest empire to exist at any point throughout history.
Oh, it's the
reaching
largest
across
empire,
the globe and carrying on over multiple centuries.
That's crazy.
The British Empire owes its success and ability to expand so widely. The geographical position of Great Britain served as a major advantage to the growing empire.
In Europe, I'm guessing.
Given that the nation was an island, the likelihood of being invaded or conquered was somewhat lower than a country that was surrounded on all sides by foreign powers.
I hadn't thought of that.
Although Britain was not completely immune to incursions, it definitely benefited geographically,
they were like
both in
invaded
terms
a bunch
of
of times.
external threats and when it came to any border disputes. Britain had a pretty clear and straightforward border between itself and any other nations. While Scotland and England split the landmass that was bilaterally united with the ascension of Scotland's King James VI to the throne of England in 1603, both states would together make up the nation of Great Britain by 1707. Sharing their outward borders with nothing but the North Atlantic Ocean and the North Sea. This open position, with easy access for maritime expeditions, also gave Great Britain an upper hand when it came to reaching other countries and continents. Needing only to cross over foreign land when they wished to reach countries more inward on their continent, the Brits were able to sail to just about any coastal nation without much resistance.
That's impressive, yeah.
Still,
like every
oceanic adventures would
crazy.
not have been so effortless for the British Empire without a strong naval fleet. This is where the size and power of the Royal Navy became a center point of British success. While Great Britain did not always control the world's oceans, the reason they began to skyrocket as an unignorable maritime power by the 18th century is largely due to the fact that they invested more money in ships and guns than other naval forces. The government and citizens of the British Empire truly believed that the future of their wealth was to be found through the ocean. Recognizing the importance of overseas trade, as well as a fleet that could also defend their land if ever required, the Brits made sure to adequately fund the Royal Navy. The Empire's focus on trade additionally contributed vastly to its triumphant transcontinental growth. Intent more on gaining wealth and increasing trade than on consolidating power through conquest, the Brits were able to create a more desirable environment for others to become a part of. After the successful colonization attempts in North America and the West Indies during the 1600s, the British Empire began to establish a commercial system that allowed for exponential success within Great Britain and its overseas territories. Colonies were granted monopolies for their products in the British market, and therefore were to conduct trade via British ships. In 1651, the Navigation Act would prompt the development of a closed economy between the empire and its colonies, thus creating a system where all colonial imports were required to come from Great Britain and all colonial exports were to be sent directly to the British market by the way of British ships. During the same century, the British East India Company was established as a means of trade between Great Britain, East Asia, Southeast Asia, and India. Initially focused on the spice trade, the East India Company later incorporated
Super
other
smart, that's
goods
expensive.
such as silk, cotton, tea, opium,
Expensive,
and
yeah.
more.
All very
Politics
expensive
made its
items
way
back in
into
the
the
day.
company later on, despite the origin being purely based on establishing more trade opportunities. Driven limitlessly
They wanted
by
to
the
be rich,
concept of
basically.
controlling a global trade market, the British Empire continued to extend its reach across the continents of Europe, Asia, Africa, Australia, and the Americas.
They managed to
While
get
the
everywhere.
process of colonization varied from territory to territory, one thing that remained consistent was the form in which these expeditions began. Unlike other empires who chose to expand through the use of military might and sovereign claims to power, the British facilitated most of their expansion through the establishment of trading posts and systems. Nonetheless,
it's easier,
the British
yeah.
Empire was not a completely non-violent authority. On top of the Anglo-Dutch and Anglo-Spanish wars near
but
the
it's
start of
easier
British expansion,
to swallow
the
for
empire
the
also
territories.
engaged in conflict with its American colonies during the American
course.
Revolutionary War, later followed by the dissension in India, succeeding the decline of the Mughal Empire, and leaving the British East India Company as a prominent political power in the region.
Yeah.
The presence of Britain in India was also notably more forceful than some of their other trade-focused enclaves.
Oh.
Demonstrated
Wonder why.
by the expansion of the East India Company's power through the threat of violence against those who protested. The
I'm
continued
wondering
tensions
why.
between the British and French were no longer secluded in India either, as the 7 Years' War erupted in 1756, lasting until the Treaty of Paris was signed in 1763,
That's-
leaving Britain
that's
as the
a
leading
lot.
power across India
Oh, that's the
and
one
the
with
world's
France,
oceans.
like the United States.
When the American Revolutionary War
territories
came in
belonging to France and Spain.
1775, after the British Empire responded to the No Taxation Without Representation movement of the Americans by sending troops to try and subdue the colonies, France and Spain chose once again to go to war with Britain, now as allies of the newly declared
They're constantly
United
at war.
States. In 1783, at the Peace of Paris, the British Empire was forced to acknowledge American independence, in turn
Of course.
relinquishing any control over their former colonies.
Yes.
Devising a new strategy after such a drastic loss of territory, Great Britain now turned
I
its
think that's the word
attention toward the
drastic.
continents of
Dramatic
Asia,
loss.
Africa, and Australia, marketing what some historians call the beginning of the Second British Empire. Though trade between the United States and Great Britain actually continued after the installation
I
of
was gonna say, it's
independence,
probably like
the empire chose to
It continued.
utilize the uncolonized coasts of Australia, which had been discovered by a Dutch explorer, Willem Janszoon, in 1606, and later claimed for the British crown by James Cook in 1770
yeah, because they're like
under
it's
the name
empty, like
of New
it's
South
a good,
Wales.
It's a good place.
Still feeding their fresh craving for expansion in South Asia,
Yeah.
the British suddenly engaged in a series of conflicts after the Battle of Plassey, which had occurred in 1757. By 1774, the British Empire took on a chain of attacks. The Anglo-Mysore Wars were fought until 1799, followed by clashes with the
It's a lot of
Pindaris.
wars.
Attacks on places like Sindh and Burma also accelerated the new consolidation efforts of the British East India Company, on
that's
top
where
of
it
what
was,
was
like,
referred to
ruthless.
as the Doctrine Lapse, where the Brits forbid the ascension to the throne of any Hindu ruler if they were
Oh my
not
God,
the natural
it was
heir.
forbidden.
Once the current
That's crazy.
Hindu leader either died or was removed in some way, the British would occupy his state and gain control.
Oh,
These acts
yeah.
by the British Empire,
Wonder who
combined
would
with other
benefit.
forms of forced westernization of the Hindus, led to the
Yeah, that's
Sepoy
so sad.
Mutiny of 1857 to 1859.
They kind of had it coming, actually.
Tired of the current heavy-handed British rule, the Indian
Yes, I
troops
don't
of
blame them one
Nehru
bit.
sparked a rebellion that would spread throughout the nation. Peace was
Yeah.
finally declared in July of 1859, and the British East India Company was scrapped. Although the empire maintained a level of control under the crown until 1947. During
Like
this span
100
of
years
time,
afterwards.
Great Britain set about making its presence better known in Africa as well. Although the Royal African Company had been established back in the 17th century, finding ample profit in the slave trade until its abolition in 1807, it was not until the 19th century that the Brits realized the potential benefit of forming a trade route across Africa. With its eyes set on establishing outposts spanning from Egypt down to the southern half of the continent, the British Empire found itself in a race against the other growing European powers, such as Italy and Germany, which eventually led to the Berlin Conference. The conference, which occurred in 1884, was intended to create some harmony between the competing colonizers.
It sucks that the
Great Britain was ultimately awarded most of northeastern Africa and all of southern Africa, meaning that at its peak in the continent, the British Empire ruled over approximately 30% of the African population.
That's insane.
Globally, at the height of Britain's domination, it controlled roughly 22 to 25% of the world's land surface. And by 1938, governed around 20% of the world's population. This remarkable prosperity was accomplished through a geographical advantage, supreme naval might, and the strategic focus on trade and wealth over bullish sovereign power for the sake of an emperor.
That's true. Okay, so this was really interesting. I felt like I learned so much. But it's kind of insane, to think about the fact that they sort of like colonized all over the world, and it's like kind of a small island. But I love this video. It was super helpful, super eye-opening, and I felt like I learned a lot. So hopefully you did as well, and I'll see you soon. Bye.